Howdy y'all, Fast Force 289, welcome back. In this video, I'll be working on my 72 351 Cleveland again that I'm building for my 76 Ford truck. And I'm gonna show you a couple of things that I've been looking at and kind of tweaking and modifying a little bit to make it better. Okay, so I've done some minor oiling improvements on this Cleveland. I'm not gonna go full out on this Cleveland because it's not necessary. It's going in my truck. It's not gonna be a hot rod. It's gonna be a cruising, towing motor. Not that big of a deal. But I did want to improve some things. One of them being where the oil pump mounts. You see this hole here, you got this sharp ridge in here, and it's like hitting a wall whenever the oil pump's picking up oil out of the pan and forcing it through this hole. Well, if this hole's not the same size, at least the same size hole as what's in the pump, well, it's like hitting a wall, and it's causing restriction in oil flow. It might not seem like a big deal, but I make every little bit count. So we're going to open this up a little bit. So here's my new oil pump that I bought. It's a high volume oil pump, and I'll talk more about that later in another time. But so what I did is I just got my piece of paper and I copied this out on a piece of paper here. As you can see, it fits exactly on the pump like it's supposed to. Everything lines up. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this paper, because this hole is bigger on the pump than it is in the block. We're going to take this right here. And also make sure that you know which way it goes. So if you take the pump set up here, you can see how that little ear is over here on the left side. So just got to keep that in mind and remember that. So on the paper, there's that little ear right there. That ear, obviously that ear would go over here and go down and go facing in toward the motor. So all we're going to do essentially is line the bolt holes up in this piece of paper. And you can see how much of a restriction we have in the block. So what we're going to do is open that up a little bit, chamfer the hole, make it kind of like a ramp going down into it. We're not going to enlarge the hole really. We're going to enlarge the first part of it, but not the entire hole. I don't want to drill the entire hole out. I just want to basically chamfer that hole to make it where it's kind of like it's a downward ramp going into it, and that just helps alleviate some of the restriction on the oil flow. Okay, so all we're going to do is I'm going to take me a Sharpie. And like I said, once I line these holes up here in this gasket, like so, I'm going to mark the hole in here with a Sharpie so that I'll know how much metal to take off when I go to drill it out. Or when I go to chamfer it, I mean. So there we go, everything lined up. We will just mark it now. Just like so. And now we have somewhat of a line on how much material we need to take off. Okay, so obviously, as you can see before, the hole's gonna be kind of oblong. It's not really exactly centered based off the pump. Well, it's okay. You know, if the hole goes out a little bit past it, it'll be fine because it's still gonna be going into the block and not hitting the block, causing restriction. So I just got my drill and I got me one of these file bits in here, and I use this on other spots of this motor that I'll cover later, but this is what we're going to use to open this hole up. So since it's kind of oblong, I'm probably going to try to like angle the drill. Just going to dig more further this way into it instead of this way until that mark is gone, or at least almost gone. And I'm going to kind of like waddle this around a little bit because I want to make that ramp like I'm talking about. So we got our mark there. I'm going to keep using my paper template as a guide. Do a little bit, stop and check it. Okay, so we opened the hole up, or we chamfered the hole. If we line our gasket up, you can see how now the edge of our chamfer is right there at the edge of our gasket, so that's good. A little bit of sandpaper, and we're going to clean this up a little bit, smooth it out in there. Also, one more little thing that I wanted to also note. I sanded it, but also took me a half round file. It's about the perfect radius for this hole. And you don't want to go in here too steep of an angle. It's almost straight up and down with just a slight angle is what I'm doing. And from where I chamfered that hole, there's kind of another sharp little edge in there. I'm knocking that sharp edge so it's a nice transition. It's a nice smooth fall into this hole. No, I don't want any resistance. none. So I'm trying to get rid of any sharpness here and make it just as even of a flow as I can possibly get. So I'm just taking this file, I'm going in here, and like I said, you can go here like straight up and down, just ever so slightly tilt it back, just enough to work around this hole here. And you can tilt it back to kind of match your radius, your chamfer that you put in here to kind of help smooth it out too. And I'm just going all the way around this hole inside to help smooth out any rough edges. And you can feel it in there with your finger. And you can look inside there, and now it's nice and clean, nice and smooth. I can go back with my sandpaper now and come in here and clean it up again like this. And yeah, it don't take a whole lot of filing to change it or nothing, none of that. It takes very little work to do this to make a big improvement. Okay, now I'm gonna give you a nice close-up of the hole and what it looks like. And you can see here what I'm talking about. See how now it's a nice fall transition in there. And you can feel down in this hole, and there's no sharp edge. Like even right there, there's no sharp edge. My fingernail doesn't get caught on it or nothing. It's a nice smooth transition from here down to the block where it falls inside there. And you take your pinky and kind of feel around in there like this. That's what I like to do. Make sure it's smooth. No sharp edges up here. Now we can take our paper template and set up here. Line our holes up. Now, if the gasket happens to just cover the backside of the hole, which it does a little bit, you can see, well, if I go the other direction, let me line it back up. If you look, see how it just barely kind of overlaps it? That's fine. I can trim my gasket out just a little bit there to kind of help meet that hole. What you don't want is the hole to be so big that it falls out under the gasket. See, I still got plenty of gasket material there. If I line my holes up and everything where it's going to sit, and I move this, you see how far I got to move it before you start to see that hole. So I can make me a gasket. It'll still clamp down and seal that properly. But now what we don't have is we don't have a hard ridge here for oil to be hitting like a wall almost to stop it and cause an oil restriction. So that's good to go there now. And it's clean inside there. And we're done with that. And like I said, when I get my gasket, and that's something else, I'm also going to make my own gasket for this. And we'll talk more about the gasket situation later. But that's how you want to clean that hole there up. Also, I wanted to show this real quick as well. I didn't do a whole lot here, but I even cleaned this hole up here where the oil filter goes. I kind of took off the rough edges here with a file. Not majorly. I didn't want to chamfer the hole or nothing. It's not that serious. But because the oil is sucked up from the oil pan, because the motor's upside down, so it gets sucked up from the oil pan, goes in. The oil pump puts it into the block, forces it out through here, it circulates through the oil filter, goes back through this hole, and then runs into your motor and all that. And that's how that works. But I just want to clean these edges up ever so slightly. And just so it's a little bit more cleaner. That's all I wanted with that. So now that I got the engine rotated around, I want to talk about some more oiling upgrades that I've done to this motor. If you look right here in the oil galley, these 4 oil galley holes here, they are also chamfered. So I did that to each one, just like I did that oil pump hole. I took my bit, I waddled it out a little bit, chamfered it. I did not increase the size of the hole. How big the actual hole is you see, that's how big it is from the factory. I did not make the hole bigger because you don't gain anything from making the hole bigger. What I did is I got rid of that sharp edge. And on this, it's not for the same reason I did the oil pump. The oil pump is because it's being forced through. I didn't want that like wall hitting the edge causing restriction. With this, it's a little different. It's like if you were to drop of oil here or water right there by the edge, you know how an edge kind of has like a microscopic barrier, a microscopic wall here that stops the flow. If you ever see a drop of water that gets close to an edge, you see how it kind of just puddles up and builds up before it falls over. Well, if you were to ramp that edge, take that sharp edge off of it, it no longer builds up before it falls over, it just naturally falls. Well, that's kind of what we're doing here. We got rid of that sharp edge around the circle there, around the hole, and we're chamfering the hole, smoothing it out, did the same thing, waddled it out, sandpaper, clean it, and make it real nice and smooth. So now there's no sharp edges. When the oil was flowing through this block, right, it is no longer having to come up to the edge, stop, and get pushed over. It will naturally want to flow and naturally want to fall over onto the cam to help save it and make it last longer. Again, these are small little details that add up to make a big picture. Another upgrade is this here. I've took this down quite a long way, really. I went as far as I could with it. I didn't want to go no further because then we're getting into some other problems. But this hole was way up here. I mean, I don't know, imagine, bottom of my finger, it was probably up that much. So that oil's having to climb up this wall to spill over onto your timing chain and gear set. Well, it's still got a little bit of an incline it's got to go to, but I opened the hole up, I filed it down, rounded the edges so it ain't having to work as hard. Now it's a lot easier for it to flow and go over. And if we look in here, you can see it comes to that hole there, and it will naturally want to fall down now onto your distributor gear, onto your cam gear, and also with that turn, it'll splash and splatter and get on your timing chain and all that, and then help keep everything lubed up well. Little details that make up the big picture. And that's the improvements that I have done to this motor so far, and probably pretty much the only improvements that I'm going to do. Another improvement that I thought about doing was the lifter board bushings on this block. And the reason why is you can see the Clevelands have this large port in here. They have a large lifter port for oil pressure right there. And the lifter bore, what you do is you bore the hole out, obviously, press that brass bushing in there, ream the hole out to the size lifter, and then it has a little pinhole in it instead of a big hole, which forces, because the oiling system on a Cleveland, most of the oil goes to the top of the engine, and then it falls down to the bottom. By doing this, it kind of restricts the flow from the top a little bit and forces more into the bottom of the motor, which is good for racing applications, hot rods, and stuff like that. When I get ready to build one for that car, it will get that. Since this is going in a truck, it's not that big of a deal. I didn't see the need in doing it. Okay, guys, so there's a quick little upgrade that I wanted to share with y'all. It's not something that not everybody thinks about. You think about cleaning these holes up. A lot of people, it doesn't cross their minds. Some people it does. I'm not saying everybody, but there's some people, they just build an engine and they get wrapped up into a lot of hot rod parts and high performance parts like intakes, heads, and stuff like that, but they don't really stop to think about the little tiny details, and that's what I like to pay attention to. This motor, when it is built and complete and put in my truck, it will look like it came factory in the truck. You will not be able to raise the hood and tell that it didn't come in the truck, other than the fact that they just didn't put them in the trucks. At least not here in America, they did in Australia. But that aside, it's going to look exactly like it did when it did rolling out of the factory. I mean, I want to keep a stock for my preference for the truck. But the internals will be improved. It's these little tiny details that make up a better, or the bigger picture, and make a better running engine. When you stop and think about the little restrictions that the oil has, especially when these motors have oiling problems to begin with, that being of what I said, how most of the oil was at the top of the engine instead of at the bottom of the engine. And on a race motor, it is crucial to keep the oil in the bottom of the motor. I mean, you want it everywhere, obviously. But the problem is that all the oil gets to the top of the motor, and so it kind of runs the bottom dry, especially when you're on it hard, and it can mess up your main and rod bearings, obviously. But with this motor, I'm not going to be turning at 6,000 RPMs. It's going to be a cruising motor. It's going to be a towing motor once in a while whenever I pull a trailer or whatever. But I would just want something that has a nice torque to it, and I can cruise down the highway, and then when I need to pull a trailer, I can. So the whole oiling modifications that they offer on a Cleveland is not necessary for me. But I'm doing these little tiny steps, and I would do these steps also even if I was doing the lifter board bushings and whatnot. But the reason why I'm doing these steps is, like I said, I don't need lifter board bushings for this motor. It's not going to be turning that hard, and it's not that crucial. It will still get plenty of oil, and I bought a high volume oil pump. If you do the lifter board bushings, you don't really need the high volume oil pump because it will restrict the oil anyway from the top, and you will maintain good oil pressure regardless. I bought the high volume oil pump because I'm not doing the lifter board bushings. And with the high volume, with a stock pan, it will not suck the pan dry because I'm not going to be riding around with my foot in the floor all the time. But what it will do on a street motor that you're just cruising around, like I'm doing with my application, it will raise your oil pressure at idle. It is a stock pressure, standard pressure, but high volume. Meaning that instead of your idle dropping down to like 20 PSI, I should maintain around 30 to 40 PSI, roughly, give or take, even at hot idle with this motor. So it will maintain a good oil pressure, but it will not, it's not a high oil pressure, so it's not going to be blowing seals and stuff like that out of it, nothing crazy. It's a stock pressure, but just high volume. So, and it's good upgrade for these motors, any motor, even in my 302, I have a high volume just because I like that oil pressure at all times, you know, idle, going down the road, whatever. So, but I want to share that with y'all. These are little things you can do to make the big picture. It's things that I like doing, and it's well worth the time. It don't take much, and that's something else. Even though this is cast iron, it don't take much for those little bits like that. You just work it a little bit at a time, because before you know it, you took too much metal off, and then you can't add metal back, but you can always take some away. So work a little bit at a time. But that is it for this. This motor is now ready to go off to the machine shop. I got pretty much everything cleaned up on it, I believe, that I need to get cleaned up and taken care of. So that's going to be all there is for this video. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them in the drop box down below, and I'll get back to you as always. And thank y'all for watching. So until next time, I'll see you in the next one. Take care.